Does it look like Mike Pompeo knows judo? All right. Do you think that man can execute a flawless sidekick? It has been decades since he has seen his own penis. The second he decided he wants to coo Iran, his penis just shriveled up. All right. You don't have time for erection when you're, quote, liberating savages. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Forkful of Noodles. I'm your host, Krish Mohan. Hey, before we get into this week's episode, I just want to let you guys know that if you enjoy the content that I am putting out, whether it's these Forkful of Noodles videos, whether it's my interview podcast, Taboo Table Talk, the dispatches, the road reflections, the live streams, whatever it is, if you find some value out of it, one big thing that you can do to help independent media such as this channel here is by hitting the like button, hitting the share button, and making sure you are subscribed to the channel. That's how we subvert and get around the censorship that channels like mine see pretty consistently. The other way you can help, if you're on stable financial ground, is to make a donation or become a sustaining member by making monthly contributions. You can do that directly on my website at krishmohanhaha.com. That's KRISHMOHANHAHA.com. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. War. Now, some have asked, what is it good for? The answer to that really depends on what you believe in. If you're a socialist like I am, you believe that it's good for, well, absolutely nothing, right? At the current, a standing military is probably what we would need because the need for conflict is still part of human nature. But if we all had a more peaceful outlook to problem solving, perhaps even that would seem unnecessary. At that point, the only thing we'd really need a military for is defending ourselves from hostile alien invasions or Dick Cheney's android body, because that's going to happen. His android body is going to be roaming around like the fucking Terminator. But under capitalism, which is what controls a majority of our governing bodies, war is good for profit, or rather made good for profit. Under capitalism, war is one of the most lucrative industries around. It spawned corporations who specialize in selling instruments and methods of death. It's purchased politicians and gets a ton of advertising. And America has structured its culture and society to serve the military-industrial complex, or the MIC. The MIC consists of the Pentagon, the corporations that sell war goods and services to the world's militaries, intelligence agencies like the CIA, allied capitalist regimes, and elected representatives on Capitol Hill. Its main goal is to fund and aid permanent warfare. And look, if there wasn't permanent warfare and new enemies to vanquish constantly, how can capitalism profit from manufactured death? I mean, sure, the easy answer to that is maybe don't turn war into an industry that depends on infinite profit from death. But who are you? Or Dwight Eisenhower, who predicted how terrible the military-industrial complex would be for American citizens? I doubt it. Average soldiers aren't really part of the military-industrial complex. High-ranking generals, on the other hand, are part of the MIC. Soldiers are expendable pawns that are used by the war profiteers that work within the MIC. And look, I understand that sounds a bit harsh, but let's really look at what war actually is. War is the ruling class sending the working class of one nation to battle and kill the working class of another nation. There are several ways that the MIC convinces the working class to do so. In our current climate, most people are overworked and underpaid. And even if they're paid well, they're most likely overworked. Under capitalism, the 40-hour work week is stretched like those jeans you desperately want to fit into right after your Thanksgiving dinner. Look, it's not going to happen, okay? And something is going to pop, right? Most Americans work multiple jobs and still don't get their basic needs covered. This means that most working class Americans are either too exhausted and distracted to see how unequal things actually are, or are too comfortable with their own ignorance. Now, war corporations like Raytheon and Boeing and General Dynamics and so on and so on and so on and so on and so those corporations often use the working class as scapegoats to justify their unnecessary existence. They claim they're job creators and help the working class that way, but these jobs are almost always part-time, temporary, and menial, as the working class makes the weapons of war that are used on other working class people. The CEOs of these war corporations are making about $500 million a year by selling death on a global scale. And even then, most of the major expensive pieces of weaponry that are meant to spread democracy and freedom with explosions are built overseas. The F-35 strike fighter was built in Italy and Japan. This means freedom is not really built in America. Look, even freedom is most likely made in China. Plus, this military equipment that is built by civilian labor isn't available for civilian use, and no military equipment is ever considered for civilian use until it no longer serves the MIC. And that was the case with the internet, the microwave, jet engines, and I also believe the pet rock. And let's be honest, even the civilians really didn't get the pet rock. It's like a rock, right? Is that the whole thing? That's the whole kind of gimmick, is that it's just kind of a rock. But these are called ancillary benefits of the war industry. Now, imagine what kind of advancements we could have come up with if we spent the amount of money we spend on the military on healthcare, education, housing, or cannabis research. But the military actually prevents the best and the brightest from going into those fields. The MIC funds STEM, science, technology, education, and math programs to siphon any talented graduates to work for them. This is what happens to most recruits. They don't become soldiers. They end up working for the war corporations or the Pentagon. The military calls it the brain drain. Yeah, that's always great to have a program named after a B horror flick from the 50s, right? I mean, nothing says you're a serious organization like a fucking rhyme scheme. I laughed at my own joke and fucked it up. But the military funding of STEM effectively kills effective science, which is based on free and open discussion. The military now financially controls that discussion to use STEM as an instrument of death rather than one of progress. Look, LSD is demonized by the MIC because there was no offensive use for it. But research from all around the world has proven that LSD can be used to treat depression, anxiety, and a bunch of other mental health issues. Plus, it'll also get you to see that most wars are based on bullshit, and it's just rich dudes jerking themselves off to show other rich dudes how awesome they are at jerking themselves off. But to further prevent the working class from seeing the truth, Hollywood films are used to show the military in a very positive light. The American military is always presented as the good guys who are there to save the savage black and brown folks who can't help but be their own enemies. Oh, right. If there was another reason you needed to be against the MIC, it's racist as fuck, right? But that racism is sold as patriotism. So if you're not racist, and Are you truly American? The military-industrial complex says, no, you are not. Every pro-nationalist America movie, which could just be titled White Savior, the American Dick Measuring Story, has an average American soldier that battles against the odds, against the rabid black or brown terrorists to bring freedom and democracy to the faces of the little black and brown children. I mean, doesn't that just warm the cockles of your heart? And it doesn't have to be a pro-nationalist movie, right? It could be an action flick or a comic book movie or a romantic comedy that uses some kind of military equipment. And if they do, the MIC has to be involved. In most cases, they'll send a script supervisor to make sure that narratives are what they'd like them to be. And in a lot of these movies, it shows intelligence agents from organizations like the CIA as like badass martial arts experts, and they're wildly athletic. And none of that is actually true. I mean, let's take a second and just think about it here. Okay. Does it look like Mike Pompeo knows judo? All right. Do you think that man can execute a flawless sidekick? It has been decades since he has seen his own penis. The second he decided he wants to coup Iran, his penis just shriveled up. All right. You don't have time for erection when you're, quote, liberating savages. Okay. Do you think at his prime, George Bush was a Taekwondo master? More like Taekwon fuck no. The gentle breeze created by uttering the word socialism can knock over George Bush in his prime. Okay, if a feather from a goose down pillow lands on him the wrong way, we have to shut down Texas and get him to a hospital stat. These people's bodies might be more frail than their egos. But Hollywood isn't as bad as corporate media when it comes to being the propaganda mouthpiece of the MIC. Corporate media's goal is to maintain economic order by constantly manufacturing consent for war. They do this not only with the tragedy they call the news, but also with ads. Ads that make joining the military look like you'd be the hero of your own video game titled White Savior. The movie is now a video game that you can live. And sure, we can expect a right-wing network like CNN or a clinically insane network like Fox News to do it, but outlets like NPR are also responsible. And this is because NPR is an outlet that has the facade of a lovey left-wing news outlet with its dulcet tones and stories about Gentoo penguins and shit. But let's not forget that they were calling for the U.S. to go to war with Iraq over no proof, over nothing. There was no proof that they had weapons of mass destruction. We know this now. And NPR was advocating for it because NPR, much like the other alphabet news corporations, is also funded by the military-industrial complex. And every so often, networks like NPR will do what can be considered an anti-war segment, but they conclude without going into the details of warfare and just say, well, war can be bad. And this is useful for the MIC because then they get to deflect any claims that they're an authoritarian force. I mean, what authoritarian force would let a media outlet take a hardcore stance like war bad? Well, maybe. It really depends. Really, who are we talking about here? Is there what shade of color is their skin? Is it an appropriate shade of brown or what? Now, the primary goal for corporate media is to sensationalize fear, right? Every threat, real or not, has to be hyped up. So making the claim that Muslims are out to get you and your wholesome Christian baby is necessary to fuel support for the war industry. There's a higher chance you get hit by lightning than a Muslim. There's a higher likelihood that Mike Pompeo does a roundhouse kick without shitting himself before you get kicked or killed by a Muslim. Fear is so profitable that I am shocked America doesn't keep the Halloween store spirit open all year round. Now, the working class is tricked into believing that America needs to be at war at all times. And with capitalism at its side, the military-industrial complex has used uses jobs as a weapon of ignorance against the working class citizens of America. Then they double down with heavy artillery of corporate media and Hollywood propaganda to ensure that dissent is seen as a national security threat rather than what it is, which is something that we, the people, need to do to ensure that power doesn't run amok. Now, manipulating the working class is only one part of the puzzle. The military-industrial complex has also taken over the government. With the inclusion of the military establishment of the Pentagon, almost every member of Congress and the Department of Defense, the MIC dictates how America is governed and what it legislates on its behalf. Congress people are pretty ignorant to how much influence the war industry has on American culture and society. A lot of it has to do with them being out of touch millionaires. Even members of certain committees like the armed services and intelligence communities only focus on profit and information one-upsmanship. It's like if a Tom Clancy novel was as boring as a John Grisham novel. You get it. You get it. They're all boring. They're all boring. The hunt for Red October, the hunt for where's my red pillow, huh? You get it, because it's yeah, you get it. And look, and thanks to the Citizens United decision from the Supreme Court, war corporations can now own politicians and dictate larger budgets for the MIC. The primary way these politicians end up giving the military such extraordinary budgets is because the war industry uses lobbyists to bribe them. I'm sorry, legally bribe them. And if you're concerned whether that's an oxymoron or not, you're right. It is an oxymoron for sure. And oxymoron is the perfect description of how the American government operates. Now, Jimmy Williams, a former lobbyist, describes what the job of a lobbyist is and how it purchases politicians. He says, years of legalized bribery exposed me to the worst elements of this country. Unlimited expense accounts, nights out on the town, expensive bottles of wine, etc. Endless cycles of money trading hands for votes. Every time a bill passed, or better yet, killed, I think to myself, that wouldn't have worked if I hadn't bought the outcome. Really, if you're a successful long-term lobbyist, you're likely a sociopath who only believes in money. And yes, I'm saying that is a bad thing. Okay, look, friends don't let friends drive a sociopathic billionaire's profit higher and higher. It's just not what good friends do. And all of this is to make sure that more and more money is budgeted for the military, the Department of Defense, and the Pentagon. In order to get an astronomically insane amount of money, these departments underestimate their costs. And then when new equipment and modifications and upgrades come up, the cost goes way up. And without these modifications, the American military, aka the world's largest military, will fall behind on these advancements. Right? I mean, if that sounds oxymoronic, you'd be right. Again, and once these departments get the money, they have to spend it all. Otherwise, they don't get the same amount or more next year. Good. You know what? I'm glad the war budget operates the same way as a Division D college's student activity budget, because hiring an entertainer to ensure college students aren't nonstop sexing each other is exactly on the same level of importance as fucking warfare. But this need to spend money is why the Pentagon has failed every single audit it's ever gone through in the history of the Pentagon. And this has become such a standard that the whole country would shut down if the Pentagon actually passed an audit. Right? What do they do? Are they, holy shit, did they tell the truth? How the fuck did this happen? We just lose our minds. As Reuters reported, the Defense Finance and Accounting Service has to cook the books in order to make this appear like it's normal. The reality is we don't know how much money the Pentagon actually spends on anything it needs. This is a mystery even Scooby-Doo and his gang can't solve. And boy howdy, those kids, they solved a lot of mysteries. A lot of mysteries. Now, something we do know is the DoD and the Pentagon uses the services of the war corporations of America. These corporations are publicly traded companies, which means that people can own stock in how popular merchants of death are. Investment banks and asset management firms have stocks in these companies, and this is how Wall Street operates, making money out of more money by selling death. But these corporations, who also benefit from owning politicians that help them get more money by increasing the war budget every year, don't call themselves war corporations. No, they call themselves defense contractors, services to purchase when defending a democracy no one asked you to defend. Okay, and these defense contractors fabricate, test, evaluate, qualify, assemble, market, inspect, package, deliver, sustain, maintain, and redesign products, and build those who use these services they manufacture the demand for. And since these contractors have no national loyalty, they sell to anyone and everyone that they can. 74% of the nations America considers undemocratic and authoritarian receive weapons from these defense contractors and military aid from America. The Defense Security and Cooperation Agency is the intermediary that helps these war corporations sell weapons to foreign nations while operating within U.S. borders. London, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Tel Aviv are some of their customers. Now, their claim is they're using it for self-defense, but we know in the case of Tel Aviv and Riyadh, these American weapons are used to oppress the people of a different nation. And these customers or wars are the aggressors in this situation, not the defenders. But using the propaganda wing of the arms industry, the US manufactures the, quote, right side of history. This practice of selling weapons to nations that actively violate human rights on a daily basis was normalized by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR signed the Quincy Pact in 1945 with Saudi Arabia that lets the U.S. surround Saudi Arabia with military bases and give preferential treatment to U.S. corporations for the infinite use of the American military by the Saudi royals. So, in order to ensure high profitability, America, a faux champion of human rights, chose one of the worst nations for human rights to be its partner in the Middle East. Further proof that there is no moral high ground for America and its military. Saudi Arabia has used American-backed force to attack and destroy Yemen. So far, over 233,000 people have died in Yemen, and the Biden administration approved an offensive at the start of their term. But war corporations don't take responsibility for what their customers do with their products. War profiteers distance themselves from the death and destruction of their products because they, quote, they're not the ones firing the missiles. Okay, name like one other purpose for a missile. Oh, hold on. Name one non-sexual secondary purpose for a missile. There aren't any other purposes for a bomb other than to explode, destroy, and kill. Hence, regardless of how much distance you put, if you make a killing tool, regardless of who fires it, its created intent is and always will be to kill. And as its manufacturer, you're responsible for this weapon you sold to maniacs that are going to use it for its intended purpose. This is a basic level of knowledge, which, when accepted, will ensure that you, as a war profiteer, will never sleep at night again. Primarily because you'll be haunted by the ghosts of the billions of people you've killed to be a rich bitch. And this distance is created in the way these corporations market themselves. They say they're, quote, providing solutions to our customers. Solutions to what? How do you erase your fingerprints in destabilization of a prospering socialist democracy and installing a terror cell inside that nation? Raytheon's Freedom Bundle will take care of that for you. Rain down some Hellfire missiles and say goodbye to the drought of sovereignty that's held these countries back for decades. Raytheon, fuck your democracy. We'll buy you a new one. So, what are the solutions they're claiming they provide? Well, they claim they're providing digital information and, quote, innovative solutions. What fun new ways of saying genocide. If you're unsure of what side you need to be on as an American, always choose the genocide. Raytheon, because fuck you if you think your vote matters. Okay, look, I know that's a dark joke. But if you're offended, remember that actual genocide is a lot darker than my wordplay. At least my wordplay didn't drop a bomb on a wedding. But in some instances, war corporations work together to make one product for the military. The MQ-9 drone has components made by at least 6 different war profiteers. Honeywell made the engine, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Raytheon built the weaponry, and armaments. And the L3 Harris made the targeting system. I mean, gee, I wonder what improvements we could have made to a high-speed rail system or any other modes of transportation if we could use this technology to do anything other than slaughter black and brown people across the globe. Just a thought. But the war corporations don't only sell weapons as part of their, quote, innovative solutions. They also sell soldiers. Soldiers of fortune, that is. These mercenaries, who also brand themselves as contractors, are hired in part to save the rich. If there was a draft instated, the sons and daughters of corporate and political elites would be off to war. So the mercenaries get hired to hyper-privatize the already privatized war industry. And this, in turn, helps the military get a higher budget since they had to purchase the mercenaries. The other purpose they serve is to make the U.S. military look better than it is. Mercenaries are used to make sure uniformed troop casualties are kept at a minimum. If there are more mercenaries than soldiers, that means there will be more mercenary casualties and fatalities than soldiers. So the military looks like it's succeeding and is far more powerful than it actually is. I mean, logically, wouldn't the easiest way to do that is, well, I don't know, like not have such a massive military, not have an industry that perpetuates nonstop war, death, and destruction all the time? But logic goes out the window when the question, well, how do you expect to make money comes into play? Instead, the war industry found a loophole to make money and send more working class people to their deaths for the sake of someone else's profit. Now that we've covered some of the more exciting products sold by the merchants of death, let's go into some of the more mundane ones. The base operations support services, or BOSS, are services that used to be done by the soldiers. Things like facility management, cooking, and janitorial services. You know, your more mundane day-to-day tasks. Fake martial artist and A1 creep Steven Seagal actually played a BOSS employee in Under Siege and the direct-to-VHS release of Under Siege 2, The Siegening. But in Under Siege 3, The Siege Won't Stop, Can't Stop, Seagal played a civilian who has to take up arms to save a baby or something. It was a really confusing direct-to-YouTube movie. There was it really just felt like it was Steven and maybe a couple people that owed him a favor. The plot really didn't make it was confusing. Don't watch it. Just do yourself a favor and don't watch it. Look, trillions of dollars has been spent by the military industrial complex to manufacture a permanent state of war so business can continue to boom as other nations go boom. If we even take a fraction of that amount and redistribute that to healthcare, education, housing, utilities, and internet services, we'd uplift every single American's lives. And as a mega bonus, no one had to die to do it. There is a justification to this insanely large war budget. Some people say that this high cost is worth it to preserve our freedoms, and this is a fabrication. The military-industrial complex actually jeopardizes our freedoms at home and strips freedoms from other countries. As I pointed out earlier, almost 3/4 of our weapon sales go to the nations that are oppressing another group of people, like in the case of Israel oppressing Palestine and Saudi Arabia oppressing Yemen. And the 25% of countries that America considers undemocratic are basically socialist democracies that have rejected American imperialism, like Venezuela, Bolivia, Honduras, and various other Latin and South American countries. So America puts economic sanctions on them, preventing them to be able to participate in global trade and accessing their own funds overseas. That's what American freedom actually looks like. Sanctions are warfare. Instead of using bullets and bombs, it uses capitalism's favorite thing, money, as a tool to bring pain, trauma, and death to countries that have chosen to take care of their people instead of chase the dragon that is infinite profit. Most of the propaganda and ad budgets are going to cover their own asses and ensure that the general public can't see the destruction they cause and the war crimes that they commit on a regular basis. The biggest example of that is the amount of time, money, and energy that has been spent into trying to extradite Julian Assange for revealing the atrocities of two branches of the military-industrial complex. Assange, WikiLeaks, and many other whistleblowers showed us that the US military openly kills civilians and journalists, while the CIA uses entertainment technologies like smart TVs to spy on American citizens. Most recently, it was revealed that 70 civilians in Syria were murdered by an American drone. Task Force 9, the group that dropped the bomb, claimed it was self-defense. The video showed that there were maybe 3 people with guns, but they weren't in attack position. And there were way more civilians than potential threats. After the attack, Task Force 9 bulldozed the area, hiding key evidence, and communication logs were changed. And all this was revealed to Congress by a whistleblower who witnessed the bombing from a military base miles away. I mean, how are all those people that are involved in this not in prison for committing war crimes? Well, the Pentagon did investigate themselves, and they found that they didn't do anything wrong. I mean, of course they did, right? This is an organization that thinks hiring mercenaries is a morally upstanding decision, while they fail every audit that they've ever undergone. This is like asking a serial killer if they're a serial killer. Of course they're going to say no. And then they're very likely going to recite their manifesto to you. Okay, the military just recites recruitment propaganda. It is interesting that we chastise whistleblowers for revealing crimes of the American military or the elites. But if a civilian was even to jaywalk in America, those people would call for the death penalty. And this is how the classified label warps and kills critical thinking, which is another casualty of the war industry. The classified label is how the MI6 hides their war crimes and human rights violations. If they're not doing anything wrong, what do they have to hide, right? So if America is always on the up and up, then why would they need to classify any documents about the American military shooting journalists and unarmed civilians from a helicopter? Look, I understand that troop movements and active missions have to remain classified for the sake of the soldiers, but that's not what this label is primarily used for. What we see the media using the classified label is as a way to demonize journalism and get away with war crimes. The military is also the world's largest polluter. The obvious reason is that they destroy the very earth itself with a barrage of rockets and the never-ending precipitation of Hellfire missiles. The large vehicles that transport these weapons and the bases themselves run on, well, all of the fossil fuels. They also use burn pits as waste managements. This puts toxins and carcinogens into the air, which then affects the soldiers and veterans of these war zones, along with the natives. War corporations also mismanage hazardous waste and chemicals that run off into the water system at home and abroad. One of these byproducts is depleted uranium, which can cause catastrophic health and environmental emergencies in communities. The money spent by the war industry is literally a cancer on this planet. The military-industrial complex claims their mission is to, quote, protect and promote freedom around the world and position themselves as altruistic and benevolent. Benevolent organizations don't fund the bombing of civilians and journalists thousands of miles away and then cover up that story. And they definitely don't fund poisoning the citizens they're claiming to protect by being headquartered in their communities. And most definitely don't topple legitimate democracies because they can't just go in and take their resources. It's like the American military industrial complex is like a spoiled child that needs a spanking and a timeout. The astronomical amount of money the MIC gets is spent on objectively bad things. And the MIC is important for capitalism. Everyone prospers when the war industry prospers. Even regular evil corporations like Amazon, Facebook, Spotify, Google, and the like are all contracted by the military industrial complex. So supporting these companies thereby helps aid the MIC's budget even more. That's why the center of capitalism is an economy built on perpetual war. And yes, I know it sounds like I'm saying money is inherently evil, and when it's used by capitalists, it is. Right now, it's being used as a limiter, something that only has value when it perpetuates more pain, trauma, and makes money on the distractions from that pain. But when money is used to improve people's lives rather than to cause them more pain, money becomes an avenue to progress that'll eventually lead us to a society that has no use for money. And if we're really lucky, no use for a military either. And that has been your fork full of noodles for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And please share this out with as many friends as you can. Share it with some friends, share it with some enemies, share it with anybody that you feel would benefit from hearing content like this, that maybe you can have a conversation with. That's always the hope, is that you can share this with some folks and start a dialogue, maybe learn some different perspectives and so on and so forth. The other thing I wanted to mention is I do have some show dates coming up, some virtual shows, some Forkful of Noodles recordings where you can be a part of a virtual audience for Forkful of Noodles. And I have some in-person show dates coming up as well. I'm going to be performing my new stand-up comedy hour, Citizen Revolution, in some select places over the winter. And then I'll be going on tour in 2020, hopefully, fingers crossed. But in the meantime, I'm also performing my stand-up show virtually over Zoom. So if you want to be in the audience for any of those things, you can go directly to my website to grab tickets. That's krishmohanhaha.com. It's krishmohanhaha.com. I've got a couple of virtual shows to round out the year, and then I'm kicking back into doing monthly Forkful of Noodles recordings at the beginning of the year as well. So I'm very excited to get back into those. Again, you can find tickets and details for all of the shows that are coming up on my website, krishmohanhaha.com, krishmohanhaha.com. While you're there, you can grab a stand-up comedy album. You can check out past episodes of my show. You can sign up for my email list. You can become a sustaining member, get free tickets to virtual shows and live shows when I come to your city, plus a bunch of other cool bonus exclusive content as well. So tons of stuff to do right on the website. So again, the website is krishmohanhaha.com. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you again to the people that consistently support this show by sharing, by watching, by liking, by leaving really cool and awesome comments. And to those folks that do become sustaining members as well. You guys are amazing. You guys help keep the show going, keep me working as hard as I do, and sharing the content that I really, really love and enjoy to share. So with all of that said and done, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.